Hello, and welcome to another Northstar Plays Sell to Singularity. Still on the tea exploration event. Excuse me, is it just me or does this one go longer than most of them? Probably just me. How with my long COVID, time seems to have almost been passing slower of late. I don't know, it does weird things to perception of time sometimes. So let's see. Working my way through accumulating generators here. Try my best to produce some content for my YouTube channel. For those of you who haven't heard me explain this before, I'm disabled with long COVID. Screwed over because, among other things, one of my employers, well, two of my employers never paid into my Social Security or even did payroll taxes and they were legally supposed to. Even did withholding taxes. They were supposed to, one of them affecting my Social Security disability work credits, the other, because it was a year I did a bunch of other jobs, doesn't actually affect anything except if I actually could get SSDI with the size of check totals would be. And that employer, the IRS did an investigation, like said they were going to do one of. Never gave me any official proof they had started one. A while back, I never found out the result of just the IRS didn't even have the business registered. I wouldn't be surprised if they did a half-assed job, couldn't immediately track down the business and just called it quits. But nowadays, I can't even get the IRS on the phone. You try like 10 different phone calls. When you get to where you're supposed to get a human, the thing either hangs up, redirects you back to the menu. Someone starts talking, but before they can get their badge number, the call just drops all of a sudden. Which is a bit of fuckery to say the least. Maybe I wouldn't be surprised if people are hanging up just to make their average call times look short, while make it so you can't complain because you don't know their badge number yet. And then when I tried calling the Social Security Administration about getting screwed by this employer and there not being any IRS info on them, on the earnings, or certainly payroll tax contributions. Like, oh, if you try calling the Better Business Bureau, it's like, that's not a government agency. And yes, I've actually tried it before when I was dealing with the first employer I paid in, and they actually just like stonewall me. Oh, it's not our job to deal with these things, and we only work to help the employers. The person always said this. We work to help them businesses in this area. We don't deal with employee complaints. It's like, it literally says otherwise in your website, first of all, but second, what am I supposed to do? I've tried calling Chamber of Commerce, Better Business Bureau. You just don't get any help. People always say it's someone else's job. And if I were to try and say sue this employer, they'd probably pull some statute of limitations bullshit. Basically, someone cheats you, gets away with it, and when the consequences of them cheating you come back to bite you, how many years later now? 11? Then someone will say, oh, it's too late, you can't get it fixed. It's bullshit, and it's the injustice of our system, which only works to help the powerful, and among the most powerful, of course, like the billionaires, but they need people who they need a political platform, the billionaires, that causes other segments of the population to share some mutual interests with like what they're pursuing, so that, because they're vastly outnumbered by everyone else in the population billionaires. They can't just like get their way, even just buying politicians on. They need to at least have some groups that share mutual interest. Traditionally, that's small business owners and what's known in Marxist theory as the labor aristocracy. So a handful of high-paid, like doctors, lawyers. The doctors and lawyers may own their own like small businesses and be petit bourgeois, and the small business owners, that group. police sometimes. So, and then hold out the carrot. Oh, you can be one of these people if you work hard, everyone else. And you don't want to do anything that infringe on these groups' privilege because you could be one of them. And that's if they don't entice people with this even stupider idea. If you could be a billionaire someday, you're just a temporary embarrassed billionaire. It's such bullshit. But it's enough to get enough people to comply with the system here in the U.S. But I mean, even like CNN has done things about how the Business Bureau is essentially a scam, and they'll like give an A+ rating to employers who have been found guilty of defrauding customers. Like the federal government has found them guilty, or if not found guilty, they've settled, so that they don't have to actually, like, the federal government will often sell these things rather than pursue them to their conclusion. They'll say they're saving taxpayers money, but what it really does is allows people to get away without the real full consequences of the bad actions if they have money and power. They certainly don't settle with, like, you don't see local governments, let's say a poor person steals, I don't know, a loaf of bread and gets caught. There's not going to be any settlement. It's going to be pursued right to a jail sentence. But, business defrauds customers and the government will settle with them. It's an excuse to not fully penalize them for what they did wrong, while having laws and books that make it look like there's harsh penalties for this kind of behavior. And they say, oh, well, we saved taxpayers money of a prolonged court battle. Yeah, you also didn't do justice. And when settling is done all the time, it's an excuse to be lenient on those who are part of these privileged groups. To not coincidentally access those privileged groups is most accessible to become a small business owner or way rare aristocracy, someone who's a white male. So there's injustices there, but yeah, there's injustices that can even affect relatively privileged parts of the population if it's in a way that's easy to sell politically. Like, grad students don't get any credit for studying towards Social Security disability insurance. So you can be in grad school for 5 years after you grad school and then remains undergrad, because you turn 21, let's say, between junior and senior year of college a lot of time. You're undergrad, 4 years grad school. You spent 5 years since you turned 21 studying. No SSDI credit for that. Even if you work during that time, most often it's going to be for the university, and the universities actually get an exemption to paying the payroll tax, which most student employees don't realize their payroll tax isn't being paid into because they got too many other things in their plate, and no one tells them this. I certainly didn't realize. I worked in grad school, but didn't get SSDI credit because the university didn't have to pay in and wasn't paying into my payroll tax. I had no idea. So you get people, they go through grad school. They're working, but they're not getting any credit. They're also doing unpaid work on top of that, often for... Oop. God, my finger slipped, and now I just spent a bunch on matcha there. Lovely. Great, I was trying to save these up for unconventional tea. But yeah. So people get screwed by the time spent studying, by the time spent working for a university while they're a student, which they're not getting SSDI credit for. And then they go on, they might be working for 4 years in the workplace, full time, making good money. And at that point, they're like 30, and then maybe they get hit by a car or get long COVID, they get disabled, but they're not eligible for SSDI, even though they've, done all the right things, supposedly, invested in themselves with higher education, studied hard, worked while in school, even worked, a job after school, and they'll still get screwed out of disability. I was always slightly older than that. I was 31 when I got disabled with long COVID. And because I managed to finagle some things. Like part of when I was in grad school, I took a leave of absence because after I didn't get a TA-ship after my first semester, and continued to progress my degree by doing research as an academic hourly. And the university can't not pay into your payroll tax if you're not taking classes and your primary relationship isn't as a student. So even though I was doing work that would have helped me graduate a lot sooner if that lab hadn't ended up running out of money and shutting down, and still helped me graduate sooner, and that I carried through my time in that lab to its logical conclusion when the lab ran out of money, and still built up my research experience, and then moved into another lab even before it started searching for new labs. I think even before I went back to classes full time. I'm trying to remember I think I started the new lab after I was in classes again, but I started the search even before returning to classes, and the lab ran out of money. It's not accurate to say I graduated sooner, but I continued to make progress towards my graduation even while I was a employee, and the university couldn't fuck me this way. So I did this and worked summer jobs, and between all things, I should have been eligible for SSDI, except that one employer, or I keep saying one that was relevant, two in total, just didn't pay in with federal withholding, payroll tax, anything. And I might have been, just because of the way where the work credit thresholds fall, I might have been one work credit short even with that employer. I don't know if I got cheated out one work credit or two by the employer, but assuming it was only one, I'd still be one more credit shy, so 19 out of 20 credits. Because, yeah, and they love to fuck young people, because the amount of work credits you need goes up to 20 at age 30 or 31, and then it just stays at 20 until you're 42. So instead of a more gradual ramp up, which would screw over less workers right around the age of like 29 to 32, they intentionally ramp it up quicker just so they can fuck people. I mean, they won't say it's intentional, but it clearly is. There's no way anyone could design a rule like that and not immediately realize that would create problems, especially when you're not giving credit for grad school and you're not giving credit for work while you're in undergrad or grad school for the university if you're a full-time student. And nowadays with the modern economy, if there's periods of unemployment, searching for jobs, you get screwed. I had some of those, but because you can earn all your work credits in a calendar year, even if it's only you work part of the year, specifically right after grad school, I should have still gotten some work credits because I did start working with employers who cheated me and didn't report my earnings or do withholding or anything apparently, or misfiled the paperwork or something. The IRS has no record of this employer, and I can't get a hold of them to actually get them to demand they do investigation of this employer, or for that matter, the Chamber of Commerce and Better Business Bureau has no record of this employer. Like, I can find the address and stuff, but it's not in their database for some reason. So I can't use their complaint system because they don't have a record of this employer, which they should. It's a business in the area. Like when I found the local Better Business Bureau, which is a little bit suspect that they have no record of that employer, of that business. But anyways, it's listed on the internet, it's listed on Yelp and stuff, and there's a phone number. It's not like it's, yeah. Anyways, so the year I finished grad school, I should have gotten some work credits, at least one from that employer, but not the full, because it was a period of unemployment where I was stuck in a rural area after family screwed me over and didn't help me move to a suburban area just outside a major city where I could have gotten jobs in my field. It was in the sciences, and you can't find science jobs in the middle of a rural area with a depressed economy. Like, I'll just pull a state on my rear. I'm not saying it's a state. You wouldn't find jobs as a chemist in the middle of rural Minnesota, for instance, okay? It's not I'm not saying that it was Minnesota. I'm saying that's an example, and it's actually a close parallel to what I'm talking about. If I name the state and name my field, I'd be giving away too much about myself. But uh, I didn't have enough money because I'd been taught over and over by my father, oh, you don't want to commit a pile of debt. And he was always criticizing the student loan debt I was already taking for grad school. He was an asshole, abusive prick, so I shouldn't have listened to him. But I did, at least on this, and I shouldn't have. And I borrowed as little in student loans as I could. Um, so I didn't have enough money to move myself if family was going to renege on their deal, because you need first, last security and broker's fee just to move to a city. Expensive. And then uh, usually somewhere you're renting, most landlords will only work through brokers in a lot of big cities now, so you kind of have to do broker's fee even though it's just money down the drain. And then they won't count the last month rent towards the rent until you've already like told them when you're moving out. So if you want to actually stay in place more than 1 month, more than just your first month, without then having to find another apartment almost immediately after and having to do first, last security broker's fee again, you need at least like 5, 6 months rent save up to on your own move to big city, which it's a lot. Right, especially if you're like in the sciences where it's more expensive cities that have your field jobs in your field. This is why people like sometimes go to Silicon Valley and like live in their cars for a while, but I didn't even own a car. So I couldn't do that. And yeah, so I was screwed, and it's worth knowing this is why I like the Soviet Union. Not a perfect system by any means, but they did have a system where people who finished undergrad or grad school in the Soviet Union, yeah, they had college, grad school. It's not some weird foreign system where nothing is resembling our own world. No, they had graduate school and undergrad. Those were things there. And when people finished undergrad or grad school, the government would pay for them to move to where there were jobs. What it would specifically do is there was like a kind of a lottery for jobs where you would take exams right before you graduate, and based on that, and I think they also gave you credit for like your GPA through school, so it was like a composite score. Based on your score in the exams and your GPA, you get ranked, and then there'd be a lottery for jobs, and you'd list your preferences for certain geographical areas and possible employers and subfields, and the people with the highest scores would just like automatically get their choice usually, and people with middling scores, there'd be kind of like a lottery, and they would have a chance of maybe getting their choice, and people at the bottom would just have to take whatever was left over. So the people who studied the least hard got punished for not studying as hard, basically, by having to just go wherever the government stuck them. Of course, a lot of these people are the people who say, oh, companies are horrible, the government told you where to go. No, they were the lazy students who didn't study hard in school. A lot of them. People say that. Just like some people say, oh, all the people who criticize capitalism are the slackers. I mean, there is a tendency for people who don't do what they need to in a system to become critical of the system, but sometimes people get screwed when they do all the right things. Then you get people like me who are the opposite, who are people who did straight and narrow, did all the right things, got screwed, and are especially angry and resentful because we did everything right, people like me, and still got fucked by an unfair system. And then people are really mad and really dedicated, in my case, following the anger into learning everything I can about why the system is fucked and how it got this way, how it got to be so unfair. But yeah, a lot of the critics of the Soviet Union were like young people who were complained about the system. They didn't get to choose where they went to work because they didn't have good grades in school. People who had good grades actually got their choice. And a lot of them chose to go to the Baltic countries, Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, because of the milder climate and the seashore there, which of course pissed off the locals. That there are all these Russian-speaking students who usually were smarter than the average local, not because Russians are smarter or some bullshit, but because these were the best students in the Soviet Union and they wanted to go where the climate was nice. So they would outcompete the locals for jobs, especially the best paid jobs, and that would make the locals angry, and that would drive nationalism and like racism and stuff. And of course, some of the people who came there would then become racist against the locals, thinking they were dumb, forgetting that they represented the best and brightest of the Soviet Union, and not everyone in the Soviet Union was nearly as smart as them. And that, so it fed racism on both sides. There were problems with this, but that was and I'm sure if the U.S. had a system like that, there'd be problems with like people in, I don't know, like New York and Boston and California coming to resent like people coming out of like Minnesota who were some of the best and brightest from there, getting relocation assistance and brought in there by the U.S. government. It's harder to imagine because it's all one country, but I'm sure there'd be some problems. But the alternative is worse. The alternative is people can get stranded, not able to go where their field has jobs, especially in the sciences, which the Soviets are very big in the sciences, so it's probably part of why they had a system like this. And you can't find jobs in sciences just anywhere. But yeah, so the year I finished grad school, I wasn't able to earn a full 4 work credits that year, and the ones I did earn, I've been cheated out of. And then, I kept working a bunch, saved money, moved back to where my parents were when I had the money. It's like, I'm either moving here, I can live in an apartment of my own, and tell everyone I know that you went back on your deal until I had to do this myself, or you can help me. And I called in like various relatives and called the grandfather and various things, and was able to exert enough pressure to be able to stay in, despite some resentment from family, to make them honor their original promises. But at that point, but only after I had the means to go with things on my own, and that saved me some money, which I put into my life savings, which are now getting screwed on by the government because I can't get SSI because I have too much in assets. And it's literally some of the money I've had saved since that time. So for not spending my own money and getting family honor deal, I'm getting screwed because I have too much in assets. I then intend to use that money to get set up, like to ease my time in medical school, not have to be as worried about money, and if I did residency, to possibly be able to afford to do an unpaid residency, so I could do more like if I had a hard time matching with residencies, you sometimes have to do unpaid ones, which means you have to borrow a bunch of money to survive, and there's like limits on borrowing, and you don't want to be stressed during that about money. You want to be focusing on doing the best job you can in your residency. So I was trying to become a physician. Yeah, so I moved back, applied to jobs in my field, but it had been like 3 years since I graduated. It was too much time. I got a couple interviews, almost got a job, but didn't get one. So I went and retrained as an EMT, and this whole time I was technically unemployed, even while I was doing the EMT course, and it was like accelerated, but it was still like over a month and a half or something. And then you had to wait for the opportunities to do the practical exam, so like another month of waiting, and then wait to actually get your license, and only then could you actually start working. So like you had to wait to get it in the mail and government bureaucracy, and that was like an added 2 weeks. It was a whole process. So that ended up being like an extra 3 months, and then I started working as EMT and was working a bunch, earning work credits, but heard about from a coworker, I still wanted to get to med school. I knew I was not getting younger, and I had a coworker who's like, do a special master's. And I'm like, what's that? And he explained, he recommended one he really wanted to go to. I said, okay, if you're applying, I'll apply, and hopefully we can be classmates. Unfortunately, he didn't get into the program, and I did, that he really wanted to get into. He got into a different one that I actually wanted to get into more, and I didn't get into that one. So life's weird, ironic. Went to that program, was getting straight A's, was definitely going to make it to be a physician, so would have paid off. But then I got long COVID and disabled what should be only one or no work credit shy, but because this employer way back in the day screwed me over and I didn't know it, didn't pay into my payroll tax, didn't even file the, like, I filled out a W-4 form, which is the form you fill out when you start working somewhere, so the employer can later give you your W-2s and they do your tax withholding. I filled out a W-4 when I started working for that employer the year I finished grad school. And they actually gave me a W-2, but then they're supposed to give you a copy and file a copy with the IRS, and they didn't file their copy with the IRS, so they did it incorrectly. And I earned enough that was required to file taxes that year, and I was really stressed about finding my next job, because that employer was a temporary, like 1 month and a half or so. I don't remember the exact length of time, but it was a temporary job I'd worked, that first employer. So I was very stressed about finding my next employment, and I didn't file taxes that year, because I wasn't required to, having no idea that they hadn't filed their copies of the W-2, or they'd even lied about the information on it or screwing me. And yeah, now I find because of that, because of that one mistake, where if I'd filed, the IRS would have the info, and they would have, if they didn't get a copy from the employer, would have immediately followed up. But because of not filing taxes, I wasn't required to. Now I'm getting fucked out of SSDI. That one tiny mistake, and the only mistake that screwed me, because the employer didn't do what they were supposed to do, and I didn't what they were legally required to, and I was not legally required to file taxes because I didn't earn enough money that year. So they didn't meet their legal obligations, and I did meet my legal obligations. I didn't do something that was optional that would have been useful, might have saved my ass, but I didn't know that I was at risk of getting screwed. Okay, well, sorry, this life story, too many of you have probably heard before, and I think I've explained it all in great detail now, as great as I care to. So yeah, now I'm sitting here like powerless, and like, how the hell do I can't reach the IRS? My congressman says that they had a person who deals IRS stuff, and he's saying like it'll be 2 months, and in the past it was one of them. Like, so it's changed recently, right? He's like, he refused to answer a question basically. I'm like, so this is a new thing because of Trump, right? He's like, he wouldn't comment. I think he just wanted to avoid being on the record as saying, yeah, this is a Trump thing. But but regardless, it's like gonna be 2 months to hear back from the IRS, and then they'll probably be back and forth, and then they request more info, and that's another 2 months. You can easily imagine it could be like a year before I can get them to do an investigation of this employer, if at all. And meanwhile, like, that's more than enough time for any appeals process with SSDI to like time out, and might have to apply all over again. And then they'll have some other excuse, so they'll say, oh, the appeal failed before. It's like, well, I had to spend forever and a day in the IRS to even start an investigation, and then a while for them to do the investigation. And then maybe I might even have to contest the findings if like they don't do anything to actually, if they just give up on their investigation without like correcting, because there's no doubt I earn money from this employer. To make it even worse, my bank doesn't keep records that far back. I'm like, banking, just give me the banking statements for that year, and I'll have proof of like what I earned from the employer from the paychecks I deposited. But they don't keep like records that far back. It's like, what the hell? Why don't you keep records like more than like 7 years back? It doesn't make any sense. Probably that's the legal requirement, they keep it that far back, but it'd be helpful if people keep it further. Sometimes you need records to go back further than the bare minimal requirement. But of course, banks, they're for-profit institutions, and they'll get rid of records the moment they can, even if it fucks you, because they're always trying to maximize their bottom line. Which makes it harder to prove I actually earned this money, because, what records do I have to confirm the fact? Employer could just call me a liar, say you never worked for me or something, and how would I prove that I did? The IRS doesn't have the earnings records that they should have, and my bank doesn't have records to go that far back. Like, I have no doubt a lot of this people have intentionally engineered systems so people get in these situations where they worked, but they can't prove they worked for someone. Systems aren't just like this. There's somewhere along the line someone designed them to be this unjust, or like, like they pushed for a rule that they knew would allow them to do these play these kind of games with people, and people don't catch that a fast one was being pulled. It's not necessarily. A lot of people are just ignorant of what's, got tricked, I'm sure. But some people, there's malice always involved in this kind of things. Or a rule got passed and just someone figured out they could exploit the rule after it was passed. I guess that happens too. Either way, I'm getting but then the rule doesn't get fixed because the people who are exploiting the rules are powerful in capitalism. The bourgeois control everything, and they collaborate with the petite bourgeois very often, as the billionaires collaborate with small business owners to fuck over everyone else, because they don't have some people collaborating with them. They won't be able to hold power. They know that. So the small business owners and like police always back up the most exploitative, like right-wing politicians, seemingly, and sometimes like the Democratic Party, because they're at best a center-left party and really a center-right party. So they sometimes work with the police too, but it's only because they're so damn far right. In this case, in most countries, there's like one country in the world where the police tend to lean left. But that's because the left has consciously worked to ally the police and undermine the ability of like the billionaire class to get them to collaborate. And a history of, I think the country it's in Latin America I'm thinking of, it was like once socialist. I think it's in Paraguay or Bolivia or something, is one obscure country where, was it Nicaragua? It might have been Nicaragua. There's like one country where the police tend to be left-wing, but usually they're right-wing. Like almost anywhere in the world. This police, this institution were created to protect the property of the rich. Like, actually trying like murders and stuff, that came later. Originally, police were just to like protect the like rich from theft and like vandalism of the property, and like beat strikers. And yeah, I mean, if you look at the history of the police, which originated in the United Kingdom and England in the British Empire, the British Empire was pretty fucking evil, so it shouldn't surprise anyone. They create all sorts of fucked up things, and the way the police were structured in the British Empire was messed up. Colonial cops, a lot of it wasn't just what they did to their own population; it's the police forces they set up throughout their empire. Anyways, yeah. So my head hurts, I'm tired all the time, and just sitting here looking at my powerlessness to get justice. And it's just so damn wrong and frustrating. Should not be like this. I shouldn't be being told that I basically have to like eat shit and die and not be able to get disability just because an employer fucked me over, and like the system has all these like glaring holes in the safety net, and the Republican Party's been working to make those holes bigger for most of its recent existence in the US. Like, the whole damn thing is wrong. So wrong. And of course, you get these dumb fascists who will try and blame like ethnic minorities for the way things are, but no, it's not ethnic minorities. That's a fascist lie. It is the power of the billionaire class. It always has been. But the rich love to divide and conquer. They can turn people against each other on like racial and ethnic lines so that they won't work together to resist them. They will. Alright, well, that's enough of this. I hope you folks are well. Take care of each other. Be kind to yourselves. You always find guidance, Star Lady home. check out my other series. I'm gonna, I think, do some single player Starbound in the same universe as my multiplayer Let's Play series I just started. Because like I can't play it too often, and I actually did that multiplayer into an existing single player universe that I'd actually done some multiplayer in before. That wasn't the first time. I've got Pop-Up Dungeon. I got a huge bar for those. I may even do some new videos. I got my Hearts Iron 4 single player and multiplayer series. Potion Craft, Avorion, Citizen Sleeper, Vampire. You know, check it all out. And be well. Take care of yourselves, viewers. Adieu. And best luck.